Today, the Philadelphia Eagles had their chance to respond to President Trump, who has been ramping up his war with NFL players who have taken a knee during the national anthem. So the president using the issue as a wedge to divide the country. Regardless of the president's manipulation of this issue for political purposes, the fact is not a single one of the Eagles took a knee last season. Not one of them. But players who have knelt in the past say they've done it to call attention to racial injustice, especially at the hands of police officers. And tonight, what may be a case in point here? And I want you to watch this closely. 4 officers in Mesa, Arizona, placed on leave after a video caught them punching an unarmed man. Again, a warning. The video is violent. Some may find it disturbing. CNN's Nick Watt has the story.
Robert Johnson, leaning against that wall, says he was just tagging along with his buddy who was trying to collect a bag from an ex-girlfriend. So, how did it go from talking on his phone to this?
Sit down, bro. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down.
Multiple punches and knees, according to cops, because he refuses an order to sit down. Officers had patted him down moments before. They knew he was unarmed before hitting him over and over.
But they kept on and they kept on and they kept on and they kept on assaulting him, and they didn't stop until he was knocked out.
The level of force is troubling. So then they approach him to try to force him down, and when he resists that tension, the officers strike him several times and to get him to comply.
The local officers' union, the Mesa Police Association, tells CNN that Johnson was not compliant and physically resisted what we feel was a lawful detention.
They hog-tie him, they drag him to the elevator door.
Johnson, with no criminal record we could find, wasn't actually a suspect in this operation. The suspect was his friend, there on the ground, Eric Reyes. His ex-girlfriend had called 911 after Reyes allegedly tried to break into her apartment. He was charged with disorderly conduct and possession of drug paraphernalia. CNN was unable to reach him for comment. Johnson was charged with disorderly conduct and hindering a prosecution. He pleaded not guilty.
And the reason why they did that, to justify their actions for beating him up.
Late today, police released the officer's body cam video, but the incident happened on May 23rd, and the investigation only began May 30th, when an alarmed citizen brought the security camera video from the apartment complex to the chief, who has now changed policy regarding punches to the head and face.
Henceforth, any strikes are only authorized in situations where a person is actively fighting with us, actively taking a swing at us.
The 3 unnamed officers who struck Johnson and a sergeant are now on paid leave. The chief, who heard the audio on the body cam, said this.
Certainly, at first glance, this looks like a mistake, and it doesn't look right, and it's my job, it's our job to collectively investigate and find the answers to this.
Johnson's lawyer wants these officers charged and plans to sue.
He's physically hurt, he's emotionally hurt, and this is going to affect him for the rest of his life.
Nick Watt, CNN, Mesa, Arizona.
Nick Watt, thank you very much. Just bringing now CNN political commentators Mark Lamont Hill and Ben Ferguson and Tom Burney, who is a former New York City police detective. Hello. Disturbing video. Mark, isn't this what NFL players wanted to bring attention to?
Exactly. You know, while the president is making this a distraction by suggesting that players were protesting the flag or the anthem or were being unpatriotic, what they were actually doing was trying to shine a spotlight on police violence, and in this case, police terrorism. I mean, this is disgusting. This is evil, and there's no excuse for it. And that's what we're protesting. That's what NFL players are protesting. That's what needs to have a spotlight on. And that's what I love Donald Trump to speak out against, since he's using Twitter all the time. Speak out against this.
What do you say, Ben?
Look, I think it's certainly time for people to come together on this and to find common ground. And I think that everybody needs to take a step back for a moment and not make this so personal. I mean, initially, I agree that this was about police brutality. But the reality is the biggest day of protests was in a day of protest by NFL players against Donald Trump. It was after he spoke out against the players. It was not about police brutality. Colin Kaepernick has his own problems with wearing communist T-shirts and wearing socks depicting police as pigs. That's a fact.
Ben, what are you talking about?
I don't know what you're not hearing from me. Listen to what I'm saying, Don.
Well, first,
Colin Kaepernick wore socks to depict cops as pigs. Did he not?
You're deflecting. That is a complete deflection. We're talking about
I'm not deflecting.
Video
I'm talking about the reality
and what the NFL players are saying to the country, to the world. They're telling you and the president and everyone why they want to take a knee, to draw attention to situations like this. Now, you can deflect with all those other things, and you've every right to do it if you want to.
It's part of the conversation.
It's not part of the conversation
but it's part of the conversation.
Okay, so can we be bigger than that then? When you look at that video,
my point is, both sides
and they say
need
that
to
they
step
are,
back.
and they say
there is no both sides, man. Okay, first of all, the idea of saying don't take this personal is in itself offensive. As a black person, as someone who is likely to be subject to this type of random unmerited violence, I do take it personal. It's my brothers, my sisters, my daughters, my sons, my fathers, my mothers who are going to be beaten by police. So yes, it's a very personal matter. No one would tell anybody else, no one would tell a Jewish person not to take anti-Semitism personally, or a gay person not to take LGBT violence personally. This is a personal matter. Hold on.
Mark, you do see that one of the guys that's hitting the guy is African American. You're talking about all police brutality here. Let's not make it about race. When you've got one of the guys that's punching the guy in the face with his elbow is one of the African American police officers.
And that is a straw man. Nobody said white police.
You can't say it's racial when you got a black guy pounding
him.
You
can be black.
You can be a black. It is racial because black people are the ones getting beaten by police. I don't care if it's a black officer.
My whole point is you have an issue with police brutality, but let's not say it's automatically racism. When you have a black guy doing it,
yes,
you have an African American police officer pounding the guy in the face.
Hold on, brother.
You can't say it's about
smarter
race.
than that. You can be black, white, or Hispanic, or whatever. You can be co-opted by a system regardless of what race you are.
But you're getting beaten by black people.
My point is it's not always about the issue of racism, which some people have been implying here.
No one is
You just said it was about racism. It was insulting.
So you think a white person would be beaten by an officer like that?
There have been white people that have been beaten by police officers, Don. There's plenty of stories. You might not want to talk about it, but there are plenty of stories about it.
Bring me some video.
So you're saying that no police brutality happens against anybody else but people that are African Americans. By the way, in this video, that happen to be at the hands of an African American.
Okay, so can I respond to that before we move on?
Yeah, but I want the actual police officer to respond. He's here.
Let me be very clear. The issue here is that structurally, black people are disproportionately abused and killed by police officers. The fact that black officers and white officers collectively beat black people's ass does not make me feel better. We did not march and struggle to get beaten by black officers. I don't care who's beating us. We're disproportionately getting beaten. That's the racial component to this.
Tom Burney, go ahead.
If you want to fix the problem with police brutality, it cannot always be a race issue.
It is a race issue because black people are the ones getting beaten and killed. This is not that hard to understand.
By a black guy who took his elbow and was pounding him in the face in the video. Watch the video. It's a black guy that's pounding him and knocking him out.
No one's saying it was.
You can't blame white people for that.
You seem to have some glee in knowing that a black person is doing it. I never said a black person wasn't doing it.
That's my point.
I'm not. It's not glee. I'm talking about the reality of the situation, and you're trying to make it into a racial issue when you have a police brutality issue in this situation. I agree with you with that. But you can't say it's always racism when you have a black guy pounding another black guy.
Why are you pointing out the
victims are black?
I have no problem with it pointing out. My point is police brutality has to be talked about with the issue of police brutality, and it can't always be turned into a race issue when you're watching an African American pounding another African American. That's not a race issue when a black guy's beating a black guy.
That is the dumbest.
That's not racism.
You can't be that.
You're too smart.
You can't be that uneducated. Go on. Go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
I can't be that uneducated. What does that have to do with anything?
Hey, guys.
You just let somebody else talk. Go ahead, Tom.
Hey, guys. I just want to yell at somebody.
No, you're police.
I wish I had brought my police whistle. Yeah, no. So first things first, the video that we saw is not pretty. It never is, right? Mark and I have many times we've been here, right?
Agree.
As well as you, Don. So the videos are never pretty. They never will be pretty. what I would ask people to do, as we have done in the past, sometimes in some cases the gun has been jumped, no pun intended, is that we have to let this play out, let the investigation play out, find out all the facts that have occurred here to make sure that if there is any wrongdoing that has occurred, which it seems like there could be in this case, I have no problem with the cops being disciplined and or fired and or sued for that matter if they have clearly broken not only procedure but the law in taking too much force in this incident. I have no problem with that, okay? The other part of this is that, to Mark's point, studies do show what the rates are of the amount of African Americans and the violence between them and police. But also, just one other thing I wanted to mention too is that the frame of this is that the guy was unarmed and that makes him not dangerous. That is baloney. Many, many officers are killed every single year by unarmed men, black, white, and green.
Okay,
so
I want you guys to listen.
This
This is an interaction. I want you to listen to this interaction so we can continue the conversation. This is before it got violent. Watch this.
Sit down, bro. Sit down. Sit down, bro. Sit down. See what happened? See what happened?
Get in there. Get his arm back. Got him. I got him. Hold on. Watch this arm right here. Get his right arm. Get his right arm.
Okay, so Tom, you were making the point. As you heard that, does that help you make your point there, or did I may be talking back to people if they punch me in the face
I would like
too,
to see.
by the way.
Yeah, right. Of course. But the premise of this was that the gentleman was not listening to their lawful order to sit down. He's standing up, and this plays out in a lot of instances that we have all been involved in. You, myself, Mark. We've talked about this before, where we have to talk about where's the responsibility of the people that the police are interacting with to listen to the lawful orders of the officer. If they're not listening to the lawful orders of the officer, and in this case, whether they're supposed to be put under arrest and they're resisting and whatnot, resisting doesn't necessarily mean that they're throwing punches at the officers. Resisting means that they're not listening to the lawful orders to place their hands behind their back, to be compliant, and so forth.
Here's the challenge,
the officers using the level of force.
The police chief
the level of force that was used here seems a little excessive to me.
The police chief admits the incident was wrong even after having heard Johnson's comments from the body cam audio. Does that make a difference?
Because because again, the level of force that I personally believe, that was needed to get this person to the ground, I believe, looking at the video, seems excessive to me. And that seems to be echoed by the police chief. Now, the investigation from front to back is going to come to a final conclusion as to whether or not they did violate some sort of department policy or not.
The chief did say they're changing their tactics moving forward because of this.
Yes. Right, which is fine. You have to, if you see something that doesn't, I got no problem with that. Again, I'm a firm believer in training, retraining, and training all over again if you have to. If you have something that clearly does not fit, and it is, not, because that also puts the officers at a disadvantage as well. If it's not clear to them at what level of force they should be at in any given incident that they're involved in.
There's always an excuse.
There's always an excuse.
Nobody wants to scream at me?
That train ain't never
Ben,
late, man.
yeah, okay. We're going to take a break. We'll come back. All right, and we're back now. After the Philadelphia Eagles practice today, the normally outspoken Malcolm Jenkins chose not to talk to reporters and instead made his feelings known by holding up signs. Other signs highlighting the charitable works of players. Back with me, Mark Lamont Hill, Ben Ferguson, and Tom Burney. So, Ben, you saw Malcolm Jenkins. Are you listening?
Look, I think it was a great way to make a point, and I think it was a great way to make a point and maybe have the conversation come back where people can actually start talking about things instead of it being about stunts of not showing up to the White House and saying 80 guys are going to show up and then 7 are going to show up. I said it at the very beginning. I'll say it again.
Actually, I think there was a report today that said it was only one who actually wanted to come, but which says a lot about.
Maybe it's only one. The bottom line was it was clearly done by the Eagles to try to embarrass the President of the United States of America. And I think he made the right decision by canceling. It was a missed opportunity by the same guy that's holding the signs up to go to the White House with his teammates and have a dialogue with the President of the United States of America. You're not going to fix a problem if you're not willing to sit down and talk to the most powerful man in the country, whether you like it or not. He's the president. And if you've got enough time to write on poster board, you should have enough time to go talk to the President of the United States of America.
That's an interesting point, Ben. I mean, Donald Trump has ignored his generals, he's ignored his chiefs of staff, he's ignored his vice president, he's ignored American voters, but he might listen to a free safety of the Philadelphia Eagles on race relations. That's what you're arguing.
He listened to Kim Kardashian and got a woman out of prison that deserved to be out of prison. I mean, he does listen to some people. Kim Kardashian even got to him.
Can you let him
So
talk,
what I'm saying is that I think...
Sure, yeah, but I'm going to correct it when he says that he never listened to somebody.
But
when
Ben,
he got an African-American woman out of jail that Kim Kardashian brought up.
Your argument is that the president has listened to somebody, Kim Kardashian. Cool. If that's who he wants to listen to, that's
sometimes
great.
he listens, sometimes he doesn't.
Right.
Ben, you have to let other people talk. And if you want for correction, I would spend the entire conversation correcting misinformation that you give out. So just let other people talk, and then we'll work it out.
Name one thing I said that was misinformation.
I don't want to. We want to get.
One thing I said that was misinformation.
Please stop interrupting so that we can have a conversation.
So here's my point, Ben. Here's my point, Ben. There are multiple ways to resist. One way to resist is to go to the White House and talk to the president. I think there is a legitimate argument that the president hasn't been particularly responsive to black voters, to black voices, et cetera, to many voices of all sorts on both sides of the aisle. So if that is in fact the case, another way to resist is to defy authority, to ignore authority. Martin Luther King wasn't disrespecting the Pettus Bridge by sitting on it, by standing on it. People weren't disrespecting lunch counters or the Montgomery bus system by boycotting it. Resistance is another way to push back. And in this case, the Eagles said, we're not going to go. We're not going to dignify this with our presence. And finally, there are many people in the last 8 to 16 years who have told sitting U.S. presidents that they shouldn't go to certain regimes, that they shouldn't talk to certain people if they find them unresponsive, anti-democratic, arrogant, elitist, violent, etc. We say it all the time. Don't dignify that person with a meeting. I'm saying Donald Trump is not worthy of the meeting.
Yeah. So, Tom, listen, Jenkins tweeted some of the signs that he held up. The second one had the number of people shot and killed by police this year and noted that the high percentage of them who were black males. As a former member of the NYPD, I want to know why such a disproportionate number of black males here?
Yeah, it's a great question. I wish I could answer that succinctly. I mean, clearly the numbers show what they show. I would, again, judge each of those incidents based on their merits and whether or not those officers acted within the confines of procedure and based on whether or not they acted in the confines of the law. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, all those incidents are not under review of any kind that I'm aware of. So we have to, again, take each incident as based on the facts and evidence and the merits as they stand. Now, as far as standing for the flag or the Pledge of Allegiance or the national anthem, I'm of the train of thought that, out of respect for the flag, out of respect for our serving military members and our veterans, that it is polite and respectful to stand. As far as the number of NFL players who decide to take a knee for that, that's their prerogative. Now that point of view isn't necessarily going to sit well with friends of mine on the right who feel that you should stand regardless, and the fact that if you're an NFL player and your team says that you're supposed to stand for the flag because that's part of your duties when you're out on the field, that's for the teams in the NFL to decide, which, again, they just passed something recently that they're going to fine the teams. So that's on them. If that is their way, to Mark's point, of voicing a silent protest, then that's their First Amendment right to do that.
Well, we'll see how this plays out and see what happens moving forward here. But I unfortunately have to end the conversation. But again, as I said every night, this is America. We have a choice. We don't have to be forced to. There's no forced patriotism here. Thank you all. Appreciate it. When we come back.